We are about to commence. Thank you kindly for your attention. Welcome to a sunny day at the Digital Catapult for a briefing on the DCMS Industrial 5G Testbeds and Trials competition. Okay, bit of housekeeping first. We are not expecting a fire alarm, so if something does go off, then we're all going to traipse out of that there and make for some very terrible YouTube entertainment. Welcome if you're joining us on the web. Phones, please keep your phones on, but switch them to silent. Do tweet away, let people know what's going on. Hashtag 5G is now, or hashtag 5G STT should get you noticed. Facilities, you've probably noticed these as you came in. Gents immediately out there to my left, your right. Ladies just behind there. So, right, that's about the niceties. Oh, and you will get fed at the end of these things. We've got quite a bit to go through, so better crack on. Here's the agenda today. It has changed slightly from as advertised, and indeed we're a little bit flexible on this. To some extent, it depends on how fast we can get through the Q&A. Please hold your fire. We have allowed for Q&A during the various sessions. All your questions will be answered, but if they're not, we'll also give you contact points where you can clarify anything that isn't obvious by the time we've got to do this. Right, first off, hi, I'm Richard Foggie from UK 5G. What is UK 5G? We are the red square at the centre of the DCMS programme. We used to be the red triangle, but there's been a change in geometry. 4 sides are better than 3, I reckon. What do we do? It's here to support the UK 5G ecosystem, manage information about 5G activities and learning, promote the capabilities of 5G internationally. In effect, we sort of hold the ring for the community, the innovation community here. In numbers, there's approaching 2,000 of us, 900 organisations. Some publications, a website. Hopefully you picked up some of the collateral on the way in. We have an advisory board. It is independent and impartial and exists to give advice to government around this. It met yesterday, as it goes. Please get involved. It is your surest way of getting your voice heard in the UK 5G debate. Send any queries to hello@uk5g.org. You should know that address off by heart by the end of all these presentations. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to hand over to Ian Crawford from the Digital Catapult, who will do an intro.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning, everyone. So, Ian Crawford, I'm from Digital Catapult. This is our offices. You're very welcome here today. And I just wanted to give a very brief intro to Digital Catapult and what we are. So the mission of Digital Catapult is to help accelerate the early adoption of advanced digital technologies in the UK. What are those advanced digital technologies and how do we do that? So we have 4 main themes. The first one, future networks. And very appropriately, one of those future network aspects is 5G. The other one is IoT. We actually have a future networks lab here in this building. It's on the opposite end of this floor. We have practical implementations of both 5G and IoT technologies in operation with little use cases to show how that's working. The lab is available, it's open for visitations and the involvement in various projects and things. We have an immersive lab, it's immediately behind the wall, behind you there. The immersive lab supports augmented reality, virtual reality, 3D motion capture and investigations into haptics. And again, this is something that's a facility that can be used by companies if they wish to do so. Artificial intelligence. So we look at the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning to various industry use cases, and we have an artificial intelligence facility that companies can utilize to explore their needs in this space. And then finally, future focus. That's looking just a bit beyond the immediate horizon, where we see how cybersecurity may evolve and how distributed ledger technology, otherwise known as blockchain, can be utilized in non-financial use cases. And we do this mainly with the creative and manufacturing industries. So the creative industries are all the way from production houses and entertainment studios and things like this. And we do this all the way through from the point of view of having the facilities that we mentioned, convening events, running programs and various activities to help organizations do that. Now, creative industries tend to be very early adopters of new technologies, though they don't necessarily have a large budget to invest in such. And on the other hand, manufacturing industries are not such rapid adopters, and they do have money to spend in the application of new technologies. So we work on both ends of the scale, and we encourage parties to come together and attempt to utilize these new technologies for the benefit of their respective industries. And then finally, as an intro to more of what you're going to see today, if Richard and UK 5G is the red square, which I'm sorry we've turned black, Richard, if he's the red square, we're on the third dimension of the picture that he was illustrating a few minutes ago. So we worked with the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, and we're driving the adoption of industrial 5G within the UK. You're going to find more about that terminology and a lot more about the logistics and manufacturing projects in terms of how they can be set up and run within this competition. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ian. Yes, Digital Catapult done some great work in sort of framing this competition and a key role going forward that will feature in a Q&A later today, it's fair to say. Right, now on the main event, if you will, I'm delighted to introduce a couple of colleagues from DCMS. First up, Will McKinnon, who's going to go through the program overview of how this thing fits in the wider context.
Thank you, Richard. Ooh, okay. This is fun. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's really nice to see so many people coming out for something like this. We think it's really exciting, and we're really happy to work with almost anybody, basically, as long as you're interested in 5G. So I'll just run you through a little bit about the program, kind of where it's come from and the thinking behind it. So when we first started the program at kind of the end of 2017, there was a real push, a real belief in trying to get the most out of 5G in UK to kind of take a leading role in this. So we have come together with our vision to build, foster and lead for 5G in the UK. So building this business case, showing people that maybe in areas they hadn't thought of, there is a business case for 5G. So this could be in a rural environment, it could be in specific sectors, it could be that kind of stuff. Foster it, so help this development of this ecosystem, give it government money, do things like making use of UK 5G, building them, giving them the scope to actually go out and kind of build this ecosystem which is doing so well, and lead the way and kind of trying to show, giving the right policy environment for 5G to really thrive in the UK. And you can see a lot of the things that we're doing in terms of pushing for planning changes, about backhaul for fibre, to really help and work on the EECC to push this and really make 5G in this country a success. You can already see the difference, I feel, in that, for example, with 4G, we rolled out commercial service, something like 50th in the world, 48th or something like that. Or with 5G, we're kind of, some of the first movers to actually have a commercial service. And granted, it may not be a huge commercial service, but there is actually one over there. You can see one of the towers over there. On top of that, the very large building, there is a 5G thing. So 5G is within sight of this building, which is great. So here is our square. As you said, it used to be a pyramid, now it's a square. 4 sides are better than 3. It makes a lot more sense now. Starting with kind of building the ecosystem in UK 5G, the innovation network. giving them the scope to go out and kind of start to build this, bring together like-minded people. And I really would recommend, if you're not already signed up to them, you sign up to them. If you're interested in finding partners, they've got a great networking kind of thing on their website. There's so many resources on there that I think people just aren't aware of. Like, they're great for events, all that kind of stuff, like endlessly sing their praises. So then what we actually did, getting into the nitty-gritty of it, we kind of had this idea of these use case trials. You may have heard of them as phase 1. They've been rebranded because phases were confusing and we didn't carry on with it. That's on us. And so we did the initial portfolio projects, which is the phase 1. So this is the 6 projects. We then moved into, we spoke to industry, what do they want to see? What do they want to, get involved with? And they said bigger, bigger, bigger. And so said, okay, well, we'll give you something a bit bigger. We moved from those test beds being, kind of £2 to £6 million to the Urban Connected Communities project, which was a large test bed with up to £50 million of public funding, really showing our support, pushing behind this. That has been selected as Westminster Blind Authority. Then we've decided, now we've done this broad approach, so we've covered kind of, the broader things that we're going to go into sectors, which is where the kind of initial thoughts for this industrial 5G came from. We're going to really deep dive into those 2 sectors. We've also done some kind of scoping on security, so looking into the security architecture, working with our initial portfolio projects to actually assess, the security needs and where that's going. We've done some scoping on transport, and we also have some international collaboration, so you may have heard of that. We actually just very recently picked the winner of the UK Career Collaboration, which is a company, I think it's called Rail something. Steady with the slides. But yeah, that was really, really good. And so showing that South Korea, which is genuinely a world leader in 5G, is interested in working with us, just shows how far we've come. They really wanted to get involved. And we've got a few more of those kind of on the burner, which hopefully will be coming out soon. So this was, again, our first step. So I'm just going to go a bit more detail into some of them. The University Test Network. This was some fantastic work that showed off some world firsts. They got some really very, very, very clever people together in some of the biggest places for telecoms research. So in Bristol, like it's UCL, Bristol, and University of Surrey, and they built this test network. They did first end-to-end 5G call in the world on it, so really showing us that we really are a world leader. We've got the kind of technical know-how. We may not build the stuff, but we know how to use it, and it was really, really impressive. Moving on. So here's a bit more on the initial portfolio of projects. So you may have seen this slide before, it's everywhere. It shows that we also, well, we're almost everywhere. We're trying really hard to be literally everywhere. But we've got a good coverage in our first 6 projects. We thought it's not bad that we managed to get, some real serious coverage in some areas also that people may not necessarily think that 5G would be, like the rural areas. So the rural first and 5Grit, kind of doing agri-tech, tourism in these rural areas. I think Orkneys, you may have seen the BBC article. Orkneys was one of the first places to get 5G because of the programme. With some interesting things like some of our risks of people unplugging the 5G stuff and turning it off, which was also good fun. But all sorted now, it's going really, really well. All of these have been extended because basically the year scope, they just started to get things up and running after obviously the difficulties of trying to get kind of equipment in a state when this stuff really is cutting edge. Like you can't just go to a local shop and pick up some 5G core and all that kind of good stuff. You really have to get it bespoke or bring in someone who's really got the knowledge to build it. So after a bit of teething problems, they're all starting to turn out some really good outputs. Some of those lessons learned are going to be coming out soon, and we're hoping to share those through our program. Just to show, from a technical point of view, there's already been 4 papers released, and they're all on UK 5G. So for looking at things like using TV white space for 5G and things like that. So really, really good stuff. Worcestershire, which is one of our kind of the manufacturing side of it, so we did that. I think they've stated that they've estimated they've had a 1 to 2% productivity increase. So doesn't sound like much on the surface of it, but actually spread out over the whole manufacturing sector. You're talking millions and millions of pounds there potentially saved using those kinds of things. Auto Air, which was our CAV, connected autonomous vehicles, so driving a car around a circuit at 160 miles per hour, maintaining gigabit speeds, upload, download. The idea being that it's like a test track. So these test tracks and things, they cost very expensive, obviously, to run. You used to have them on a hard drive. You drive them around, you park the car, you take it out, you transfer it. Now that can all be done on the fly. So it means you can do more driving, more testing, that kind of stuff. That's actually, I'd say that one's probably the closest to actually being commercialized now. You can actually rent track time and use the kit and stuff. So really, really impressive. And then our health one. So health is difficult, but there's so much that 5G can do in the health space. And it's looking into combating loneliness kind of giving people be able to get in contact with their doctor using these kind of this technology. Moving on. So urban connected communities. You may have seen this one recently about the ambulance of the future. So it's an ambulance where you can speak to a doctor while you're en route. So the paramedics can kind of tell them what they're doing. So very quickly you can get the expertise you need that could potentially make a difference in those vital first steps dealing with somebody in the ambulance. There's also they're looking into a citizens' wellbeing project. So this is kind of again sort of like the Liverpool side of it. So trying to kind of combat loneliness, give people ability to speak to their doctors, using video technology. And then an application accelerator as well. So those are kind of some of the really early use cases. It is a very complex project, but it's kind of, once they build the test bed, the use cases will come, is kind of the idea behind it. But it's been tricky, but it's, I think it's going to be really amazing once it starts to properly roll out. It can just take a bit of time to get started. So our Rural Connected Communities project, this one hopefully is coming soon. You may have heard about something about ministers and things like that, which is great. But we're moving forward, and this is hopefully the competition is going to launch relatively soon. And so this one is again a place-based one, so like UCC, but in the rural, kind of following the idea of the outside in. So we really need to actually put effort into this. If we leave it as it is, everyone's just going to say it will never work in these rural areas, and it may not work in the way that we're thinking it does. But there could be some different ways we could do it that will really show the business case for these kind of more out there areas, but not just as in pure rural, but also semi-rural. So things like suburbs and stuff like that. A lot of those, in the traditional model, can actually be not worth rolling out to. And so this is also kind of encouraging people to pick those places. I think they're thinking of picking 4 to 6 places and doing a test bed in them to really show this kind of thing. So not just farming is the point I'm trying to get at. This is what people always think. So international engagement, there is UK Rail Next. This is our joint collaboration project with South Korea. So I think Cisco is the lead partner on it, and that's going to be trialing infotainment content that we're creating on the Korean tech. So that's going to be, I think, starting with the Seoul Metro is where it's going to be on initially, but then hopefully they're going to spin out from there and do it in different places. The idea being that we can learn from them on the technical side, they can learn from us on the kind of more creative side, the infotainment side, and we both get a lot out of it. And that was secured through an MOU that UK 5G signed initially. So again, doing a really very good job, UK 5G. Please keep signing more of them. They're great for us. And there is also, if you want to read more, a bit more detail, get a bit more kind of links and find out more about the specific project, there has just been a program update that kind of outlines all these in a lot more detail than I've spoken about today. And it's full of good stuff. The website is full of good stuff. So future projects. We're looking into kind of supporting startups. There's an idea of an innovation fund to kind of help these people who maybe not necessarily have a route to it. So kind of startups and SMEs. So smaller amounts of money, but really nice big impact. And that's kind of being scoped at the moment. But there's also kind of some other ideas coming along. And there's also the other point is just to make sure that you're aware of other things that are up. So there's obviously a lot of money available through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. There is a lot of overlap with that, obviously. And the Innovate UK has competitions all the time that can cover this. So, there's plenty of money out there for good ideas. And we'll hopefully get so many of them. Moving on to the competition overview. So I'll just pass you over to Joe Williams. Thank you very much for listening. If you do have any questions about the programme as a whole or specific ins that you've got some ideas about, please come and speak to me. I know most people in the programme, if not everybody. I can put you in the right direction. I can make some calls. Thank you very much.
Can I just confirm all the slides will be sent out soon?
They will, indeed. An awful lot of slides coming up. Don't panic, you don't have to photograph more, don't have to take shorthand or whatever. They will all be up on UK 5G by the end of the day.
Cheers, Foggie.
Yeah, okay, thanks Will and thanks Richard. So yeah, we'll be making these available, but I would also point out that what I'm talking through is the competition overview and guidance document that was published on our website last week. So I'm going to be talking through each section of that document in the order that it appears in that document. So if you've got access to it or you've got it in front of you, you can follow along. The there'll be an opportunity, of course, to ask questions and to discover anything that wasn't clear in that document. But everything you see here is also in that document too, and expanded in full detail there. So advise everyone to read that too. So yeah, like I just said, I'm going to be talking through the competition. So the first thing I want to talk about is why we're doing this competition. So my colleague Will was just talking about all the other activities that the program has been doing so far, and these have been going since 2017 when the program started. We've had a number of successes, and the point that we're at now is moving on to another stage of investments that are designed to be longer term and to build on the lessons that we have learned from those earlier projects. And like our Secretary of State said, this is about moving past the idea of enhanced mobile broadband and focusing on the productivity and efficiency benefits that 5G has the potential to enable, and really helping make the UK a leader in the adoption of and in utilization of 5G in ways beyond enhanced mobile broadband. Okay. Yeah, good. I was worried there for a second. But so some of these are the program, the aims of the program as a whole. They're covering all the projects that my colleague Will was just describing. So we want to move a bit beyond mobile broadband. We're targeting industrial users because we want to see how 5G works in real-world businesses. A lot of the projects so far have been made kind of insulated test beds, looking at the kind of the viability of the technology, and now we want to see how that technology behaves in real-world businesses. Like I said, this is the productivity and efficiency benefits is an aim of the program as a whole, and it's one of the ones that applies is most pertinent to this particular intervention in specific vertical industry sectors. An objective of the government, the objective of the program, is to support the government objective of helping make the UK a global leader in the adoption of 5G. And what the program is focused on are new and different use cases for 5G. So, like Will pointed out, 5G is happening in the consumer world already, and the country's mobile network operators are leading that in cooperation with the regulator, Ofcom. So what we're looking at is looking beyond that and trying to make the UK lead the world in using 5G in new and different ways and extracting those benefits. So we're looking for engagement from a range of companies. So we're focusing on the manufacturing and logistics sectors, and of course we expect that businesses involved in those sectors directly will be involved in our projects. But the projects are also open to partners from a range of other industries, the obvious ones being the mobile network operators themselves, systems integrators, those companies involved in telecoms in general. But any business can be a partner to the project. It's up to the project partners to decide amongst themselves what is the best for their proposal. SME, small and medium sized enterprises, that's something that features throughout the competition overview and guidance, and something we're going to touch on a number of times today, because we really want to emphasize that our program is designed to be as friendly to SMEs as it can be, and we actively encourage their participation, and we expect the partners to these projects to do the same. So for in a high quality proposal, the proposal will demonstrate how the partners have actively sought out the participation of SMEs and designed their proposal in order to be appealing to them from the outset of the project. So moving on to the sections of the overview and guidance document itself. So one of the sections I wanted to highlight is the challenges to industrial 5G. So we've identified these challenges, and we've provided this as guidance to you because in order for a proposal, when we're assessing the proposal, what we'll consider to be a quality proposal will be one that has that demonstrates how it has considered all of these challenges that we have listed here. But like with, and this is going to be a point that I repeat, this is not an exhaustive list of the challenges that businesses may face in implementing industrial 5G. The businesses themselves will, of course, know the challenges that they face better than we could, and we are very much open to proposals identifying new and different challenges and describing how they're going to address those. But proposals should have considered these challenges that we've suggested in the guidance here in order to satisfy our scoring criteria. The description section of the overview part of the document is there to guide you. So these are the different elements that we expect to be included in the projects. Like it's demonstrated from our square of squares. We've run a number of different projects now, and these descriptions are based on our lessons learned so far. So in the description section, you'll find where we describe what we consider to be a 5G focused project in the first place. And so when the proposals are answering the scored questions part of the application form, they should demonstrate how they have taken these descriptions on board and are continuing with the lessons learned from the earlier projects in putting their proposal together. Okay, so moving on now to kind of what's probably the more interesting part, which is the money available for the projects. So the programme as a whole is funded with £200 million from the National Productivity Investment Fund. And we have allocated £40 million to specific vertical industry sectors, to exploring industrial 5G in specific vertical industry sectors. And we're starting that exploration with these two sectors, manufacturing and logistics. And this is how we expect the funding to be allocated once we have assessed the proposal. So we're targeting between 4 and 6 projects in the manufacturing sector, each receiving between £3 and £4 million each. And in the logistics sector, at least 2, possibly 3 projects, each receiving between £5 and £10 million. And this is based on what we've learned from both our previous projects that we've run and the analysis of these sectors that Digital Catapult done for us earlier this year. So the manufacturing projects are designed to be slightly smaller scale, but higher in number, and this is in order to gain the benefits of having coordinated action across different types of manufacturing business, because we think that that will present the most benefit to the manufacturing sector as a whole. The logistics projects are designed to be larger scale and cover wider areas and address larger overarching challenges that sector faces, or that we believe that sector faces, and we'll touch on that again later on. So the funding is available as DCMS grant funding to cover eligible costs of project partners, and in the guidance document and in its accompanying documentation, you'll find an explanation of the different tiers of project partner that can be involved in a consortium. Funding is available across 3 financial years, starting this financial year and running through to 31st of March 2022, which is when the programme is funded until. Projects can continue their activities beyond that date, so beyond the point at which grant funding is no longer available. But they should make that clear in their proposal, at the proposal stage, that they intend to continue the project past that date, and they should have a proper plan in place for securing alternative funding. So that might be commercialization, it might be other government funding competitions or regional public funding, but it should be made clear at the proposal stage. So what is it like to work with DCMS? So the money I just described as being available, and similar to all of the previous projects that Will was describing, the funding is aimed at consortia. All of our projects have to be collaborative, and I'll touch on why just in a moment at the end of this slide. So to be collaborative, a consortium has to have at least 2 partners in it, and those are partners actually receiving grant funding. But there's no upper limit on how many partners can be part of a consortium. In previous stages of the project, some consortium have had 30 or 40 members, so it's completely up to you to decide what's best for your proposal. At least one, from the outset of the project, at least one of the partners receiving grant funding has to be an SME. And like I said, we want to encourage participation of SMEs, so we do hope that there will be more than one SME involved in each consortium, particularly in consortium that have a greater number of partners. But in order to be eligible at all for the grant funding, at least one of them must be an SME. Each consortium has to designate a lead partner at the application stage, and the lead partner is the one who will submit the application and be the point of contact through the assessment and selection phase for us at DCMS. They're the one that we will deal with during that phase. And if the proposal is successful and is selected and receives funding, the funding will be paid to the lead partner, and it will be for the lead partner to then distribute it among the other members of the consortium in line with the proposal that they submit during the application stage. All funding is in the form of DCMS grant funding. So government grant funding has certain standard strings attached to it, and you can read more about that in the general guidance to grant applicants that is provided alongside the specific competition guidance. Grant funding is typically paid quarterly in arrears, and like I said, it's paid to the lead partner for them to distribute among the other partners. I said I'd come on to match funding. So the 5G Testbeds and Trials program expects 1-to-1 match funding balance across the entirety of its investments, and that applies to each of our interventions, including this one. So our expectation is that industrial 5G projects as a whole will be balanced 1-to-1 match funding. So for every pound that DCMS puts in, it will be matched by the partners to the project. So that means that the £3 to £4 million for manufacturing projects, that is the DCMS investment, and the £5 to £10 million for logistic projects, that is the DCMS investment. Additional match funding from project partners is expected on top of that. And But there are different levels of match funding available depending on the size of your business. So 60% DCMS contribution if you're a small business, 50-50 for a medium business, and 40% DCMS contribution for a large business. We're going to do questions after this, if that's okay. So we use the EU definition of an SME, and these percentages are set by state aid rules, European state aid rules. So these projects are not strictly R&D projects, they are experimental development with collaboration, so these are the rules attached to this type of project. So they are set, and there's something we have to comply with. Before we move on to that, I'll point out that the consortium needs to be private sector led, which is what I'll touch on later on. But public sector organizations can be involved, so can academic institutions or research organizations, and there are different levels of funding available to those organizations, right, that are different from the 60, 50, 40 that was described on the previous slide. That refers specifically to private sector businesses. So moving on to scope and eligibility, if you're following along in the guidance document itself, moving on from the overview section to the actual competition guidance section. So looking at manufacturing first off. Proposals should identify a specific manufacturing process that they are targeting with their proposal in order to be considered in scope. So from the work that Digital Catapult done, the analysis work they did earlier this year, they've identified these 6 illustrative examples of manufacturing process. So these are designed to show you what we mean when we say you should target a particular manufacturing process. This is designed to let you know what we mean by that. So they're split across high value, low volume manufacturing and low value, high volume manufacturing. Like I said earlier on, this is not an exhaustive list of all the possible manufacturing processes. It's designed to illustrate what we mean by a manufacturing process. You may have a different one in mind, and that's totally fine. But whichever process you have in mind, you should make it clear in your proposal which one you are targeting and why you are targeting, why is it beneficial, why is it important for the sector and the economy in order to put together a high quality proposal. In logistics, the expectation is that each project, which are designed to be larger in scale, covering potentially multiple different locations, but they should be addressing an overarching challenge for the logistics industry. And so the 2 examples that we have identified are just-in-time supply chains, so helping goods move more quickly, or sustainability, things like reducing food wastage through monitoring or other forms of quality control monitoring. Again, this is not an exhaustive list of overarching challenges that the logistics industry faces. Businesses in those industries will, of course, know a lot more than we do, and we're very much open to proposals identifying new challenges. But we've given these examples in order to illustrate what we mean by an overarching challenge to the industry, and hopefully that puts some color on it. So continuing that example, a project based around a logistics hub, for example, an airport, a seaport, a major warehouse hub, should address a number of the logistical aspects of that supply chain. Okay, and so that's why we've given these examples below. So that would be an example of our interpretation of what addressing an overarching challenge to the logistics industry looks like in practice. So these are common scope elements. So I've gone through those specific to manufacturing, specific to logistics, and these are ones that cover both logistics and manufacturing. Each proposal should make it clear that they are addressing at least two of these scope elements in order to be considered in scope for the funding competition. So you may be exploring the potential for 5G to deliver cost savings. So that's using 5G to address existing business challenges, or you may be using 5G to develop new products or services, new forms of business, new business models, for example. And the final one, provide a clear assessment and reduce commercial risk associated with investment in industrial 5G adoption. So I expect that that is something that will feature kind of cut across the other, cut across the ecosystem and the other examples that we have given. So you may find in practice this means that you do, you address the last one and kind of one other, but we are open to interpretation. In your proposal, you can make a case for doing it however best suits your proposal. So here are some of the things. So those were the things that your proposal must feature considered being in scope. These are some of the things that your proposal must do in order to be in scope. So we've set out a range of standards that your proposal must meet. I haven't listed them all here because they're available in the guidance. I can't really add anything more to them. You have to satisfy all of the relevant criteria. And your proposal must demonstrate impact in at least one of the following areas. These are pretty broad areas. They're designed to be broad, designed to be open to interpretation. The UK's international competitiveness, this is key to the programme's objective in terms of making the UK a global leader. We hope that pretty much that most of the projects that are in scope of this competition will be tackling that. Efficiency and optimization, productivity increases. This is another key aim of the programme in general, so we're very keen to see how that one is tackled by these projects. And new business models I will highlight as well, because and you'll see it when we come on to the actual competition questions. The commercial sustainability of these projects is one of the things that makes this investment different to some of the previous investments we've made. We're very interested to see, now that we're working in real life business environments, how these projects can be made commercially sustainable, and new business models is a key way to doing that, particularly if projects have the ambition of continuing on beyond the grant funding period, which is something we very much encourage proposals to consider. So I'm going to pause now because we've done quite a lot and there's still quite a lot to come, and we can do questions now.
Thanks, Jeremy. Onto testing. Is this on film? Yeah. Say who you are, where you're from, and then ask a question.
Okay. I'm Xavier Priam from the University of Bristol Smart Internet Lab. Yes, there is funding for academics and for public bodies, or let's say public companies. When you say one-to-one matching, it's only on the up to 70% for the industry on the total budget, or it's including the amount for the academics?
So our ambition is for, like I said, the program as a whole wants to have one-to-one match funding. So all of our interventions target one-to-one match funding. There is scope for us to manage that across, like, because this is a number of different projects, so potentially there could be 9 projects in this intervention. So we would want, across those 9, we would want to have a balance of one-to-one match funding. The easiest way for that to happen would be to each project to have one-to-one match funding, but of course, reality doesn't always play out that way. Academic institutions and all this is explained in the guidance, are not expected to contribute one-to-one match funding. They can receive 100% contribution from DCMS. The project that they are involved in should aim to have a one-to-one balance across all of its partners. But you can make a case for your own proposal and why it's better a different way. And that might be because of an abundance of SMEs, for example, which would be a positive thing in its own right. So it's a target, it's not a rule. You're not ineligible if you don't have that. You will not be marked down if you don't have that, but it's a consideration.
This means that we try to have less than 730. You want to have 80-20, for example.
So non-private sector partners cannot receive more than 30% of the grant funding for each project.
But you prefer 20.
I wouldn't say we have a preference, no. Like I said, our target is one-to-one across the program, ideally one-to-one across each project. But further than that, we don't have a preference now.
Thank you. Any more questions? 1, 2, 1, 2. Is this one working? No. Oh, bear with us. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ah. This one's in the key of G. No, sorry, righto. At the back.
Hi, my name is Paulette Elliott from Huduma. My question is regarding partners, collaboration partners. Would it be possible to include a partner currently within the EU in this project?
A partner that is currently within the EU,
Yeah,
but
well,
like not UK based.
Correct, non-UK based.
Yeah. So, So the projects have to be based in the UK, and all of the partners receiving grant funding have to be in the UK. That doesn't mean they have to be entirely UK organisations. So, of course, international businesses can receive grant funding, but it needs to be paid to whatever their UK kind of subsidiary is. So an EU business the same thing would apply. So they would the grant funding has to be paid to someone in the UK. Yeah. So a European business, as long as they have a UK presence, absolutely, that's fine. Kind of non-private sector businesses based in the EU, I'm not entirely sure how that will work. I imagine like if they have a UK entity to which grant funding can be paid, then that would be fine too. But the only restriction is that the grant funding has to be paid to UK organisations. So whether that organisation extends in the EU or anywhere else in the world, there isn't really a distinction. It's just about the UK part. Does that answer your question? I hope so.
Thanks, Joe. Moving on, we've got a question coming over the web.
Okay.
Yeah, so we've got a question from someone online saying, what role will the digital catapult be taking in the competition? Will it be partnering, or will it retain some sort of a coordination role?
Yeah. So the digital catapult were involved in the analysis work earlier this year, which has informed our approach to the competition. They're not involved in the competition itself, either in running for it or bidding for it. So we, DCMS, are handling the competition ourselves. That is slightly different from previous competitions, or some of the previous competitions that we've run where we have used Innovate UK. We're not this time, we're doing it ourselves. The digital catapult are not involved in that part. They are, and they will not bid into the competition either, that's part of the grant agreement that they have with us, and that's because they are staying involved in industrial 5G testbeds and trials through to the end of the grant funding period in 2022 as a coordination, an innovation coordination and support partner. So they will be providing services to the projects once they're up and running to help them collaborate with one another and extract benefits for the sector as a whole. And we're going to talk more about that later on. Ian is going to talk everyone through that, exactly what they envisage their role being and what their offer to the projects will be.
Hi, my name is Mukid. I'm with AWTG. We're one of the partners on the Worcestershire Testbed. So very interested in what you're describing about manufacturing. Around the funding and the from an SME perspective, and you mentioned 60%. Is that sort of hard-coded in sort of EU or UK law, or is there flexibility to do that? Because one of the things or challenges if you're an SME is meeting that 40% gap and funding that yourselves. And SME, you know, you're aware of the challenges that SMEs have. So if that threshold were to be slightly more relaxed, then it would encourage and enable other, you know, smaller SMEs to engage with this process. And the second question I have follow-up to that is, does the 60% threshold apply to both resource and materials, or is it only sort of resources? Can you claim, you know, 100% of materials, for example?
So taking the first part first, the 40, 50, 60 cap, those are European state aid rules, and they are fixed. Okay, for this type of project, which is experimental development with collaboration, those amounts are fixed, unfortunately. So we have designed the competition to hopefully be appealing to SMEs in other ways. So we're going to come on to later on the requirement that all of these projects will have to run an open call to recruit new consortium members after the first 12 months of the project, which we hope will appeal to SMEs who perhaps don't have the resources to take part in the earlier stages of the project that are more capital intensive when it comes to building infrastructure of the test beds, but the rules are fixed. On the second part of your question, in terms of what the funding can be used to cover, so we fund so we can treat the contribution is used to cover the costs of participating in the project. So there's a list of eligible costs. There's eligible cost guidance that is an additional document attached to the competition guidance that, when it's available on the web, that explains exactly what costs are eligible that you can be recouped for. And the big ones, the major ones are physical infrastructure, so buying equipment, and payroll. So how an SME or any company, but particularly relevant to an SME, may contribute the 60% value is through staff, right? So they don't necessarily have to put in cash in literal forms, but they can contribute staff and be and have 60% of those costs covered in that way.
Yeah, so we've got another question from online. Is there any potential for smaller projects in the logistics sector with grant requirements below the 5 to 10 million range?
Is there any scope for that? So the 5 to 10 million pound range is what we're targeting, and that's our intention. So proposals will score well, and according to our scope, if they are within that range. It is possible to make a case for funding at different levels, so below that range, but you would be tying one hand behind your back, in a sense, by falling outside of scope, in a sense. But a case can be made for it, but we encourage we encourage projects to fit within the scope that we've described.
Thanks, Joe. And a final question before we move on.
Yeah.
Hello there, my name's Mike Wills from Federated Wireless. Can I just ask, in addition to the question the gentleman asked there, you've talked about 60% can cover staff. What about historic investment into some of the technology that might be being brought to the table? Can the cost be offset against that at all?
A historic investment, can you elaborate?
So development of the technology that will be used as part of the bid.
So you could, if you have the physical infrastructure equipment. So buying equipment is part of the eligible costs. If you're contributing the equipment, then that could be an eligible cost. But you're talking about kind of the knowledge and experience from developing that hardware.
For instance, we have a piece of automated software that we'll be looking to incorporate into this, which has gone through a load of development. It's continuing to be developed and advanced as we go forwards. Is there any way that part of that could make up part of the match funding?
Not development that has already taken place. Okay. Continuing or expanding the development of that software could be part of the proposal, in which case it would be covered. So if expanding that software, developing that software in some way is part of the proposal, then you could receive funding to cover payroll costs of the people doing that, but not the development that has already taken place.
Okay, and sorry, and just with the percentage bounds, those didn't quite understand. The percentage for small, medium, large enterprises is not driven by the lead partner. It's broken down underneath. It applies
to each of the partners individually.
Okay.
So the lead partner will receive the percentage for whatever size of business they are, as will all the other partners. Right. Sorry? Yeah, so you'll make that clear, and so each of the partners has to submit their own finance form, where you make that stuff clear. Anyway, this gentleman here he was dying, and I feel bad.
Okay, very last.
Yeah, firstly, I was interested in your response to the question about funding, the range of funding, because in phase one proposals, that some phase one proposals were rejected because they fell below the window. Mm-hmm. So could we have that in writing, please, through some mechanism? Because that's very important as to whether we should be honest about our costs or inflate them to fall within the window.
Yes, well, I'm kind of reluctant from the mind. Just to go back to my answer, yes. I said it was possible. I didn't say we encourage it.
Yeah.
So,
but I'm saying that previously they were rejected before they were assessed, and therefore it's very important for us to know in writing, because it's not in the documentation that's been submitted so far.
Okay, but so I don't believe that is a matter of eligibility. So so it wouldn't result in automatic rejection. But I will. Before I put it in writing, I will explore that properly.
But we need to know. We need to know as part of the proposal. And the question I was going to ask is about. Obviously, these projects are quite close to, quite far advanced in the development cycle, and therefore, if they're successful, the participants would expect them to move into operational use. So, what are the how do you address the state aid issues about moving R&D into operational use? Has that been considered as to how that will be allowed?
So the state aid parameters have been considered, and we're very confident that these projects will fall under.
Not a project, but if they are successful as R&D projects, mm-hmm. they will then. Presumably the participants will wish to continue to use them as operational systems.
Yeah.
And then there's a state aid consideration about moving an R&D activity into operational use, and that's not again not addressed in the documentation.
Right. So so R&D projects is a specific term under state aid, which these are not. Okay. So this is I forget the exact term. Experimental development with collaboration. So these are supposed to not be R&D projects. And so under the rules of experimental development with collaboration, we move the progression which you describe is within those rules. So it should be fine.
So again, perhaps you'd like to put that in writing that that is the category you believe it to be, because that's also important for people proposing.
Yes, I thought we had. I thought we had done, but if we haven't, then we definitely will do that. Yeah. So Will's going to write that down so that we remember.
Okay, thank you kindly. Indeed, a few unanswered questions. Please contact us, hello@uk5g.org. Indeed, Joe's going to come up with some addresses as well. No question will go unanswered before the 10th of October, I think it's fair to say.
Well, before the 30th of August, actually. Yeah.
The answers to questions be circulated and published rather than just reply to the individual.
Yeah, so any question you submit to us via the email address that's on the website before the 30th of August will definitely be answered, and all the answers will be published on the website. Unless it's commercially sensitive, in which case you'll receive a one-to-one response. Okay?
Righto, thanks, Joe.
Yeah?
Right, so we move on.
Moving on, okay. So, eligibility. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the eligibility section. The rules of eligibility are designed to be quite black and white. So you must meet these to be considered for funding in the first place. So applications will be rejected before going to assessment if you don't meet the eligibility requirements. So these should be they're designed to be straightforward. So if anything is unclear, then please do make that known. So there's an application form provided with the same place that you find the guidance online. Make sure you use that and follow the instructions in the application form. There are word limits and rules about using appendices for diagrams and graphs and so on. So make sure you understand those before you write your answers. There are finance forms, and there's a finance summary form if you're a manufacturing project. They're important, and those must be completed. You will, on the application form, have to be asked to indicate whether you are a manufacturing project or a logistics project. This is so you can be measured against the different scopes that I've described earlier on, so we can decide whether the proposal is in scope. And like I just said, there are word limits for each answers, and they are different for the different questions. So pay attention to the individual question as it's asked, and as the word limit and appendices are described on the application form. Projects must be carried out in the UK. This came up with the question the lady asked earlier on, so hopefully we've addressed that. We're aimed at consortia, and the consortia must be business-led. So that means the lead partner, where I described that each project must nominate a lead partner, has to be a private sector business. And that is different from some of our previous projects that the program has done. So if you've been involved with us before, take note of that. That is different. They must be collaborative, and to be collaborative, you have to have at least 2 members, like I said earlier on, and at least one of them must be an SME. So if your proposal only has, if your consortium only has 2 members, one of them has to be an SME. And there are rules on subcontracting that can't exceed more than 30%. There are more rules than this. This is an exhaustive list of everything that you must comply with to be eligible, but these are the ones that I wanted to highlight. The eligibility is designed to be straightforward and black and white, and applications will be rejected before going to assessment if you don't meet the eligibility requirements. So make sure you understand them before you start drafting your proposal. So this kind of addresses one of the questions that was asked in the Q&A. Only UK-based organisations are eligible to receive funding from this call. In the guidance documents, there is an explanation of the different levels of being a partner. So you can have partners that do not receive any grant funding, and the rules are different for them. No single partner can receive more than 70% of the eligible, of the funding to cover eligible costs. So if you only have 2 or 3 members in your consortium, you can't have one of them that receives more than 70% of the grant funding. And 70% of total eligible costs must be incurred by private sector businesses. So in the answers to Xavier's question earlier on, I mentioned that non-private sector businesses can't receive more than 30% of the grant funding.
There. On that second bullet, it says eligible project costs. I assume you mean eligible grant funding, which is half the project cost, roughly.
Yes, yes. You're right. Yes, this all applies to the grant funding that DCMS contribute to the project costs. Right. So the match funding is part of the project cost as well, and that's not covered by this stuff. So as I was saying, yeah. So private sector businesses have to make up 70% of the funding that's received. So 30% can go, up to 30% can go to academia, research organizations, and public sector organizations. And like I said, we don't discourage public sector organizations or academics, but they do have to fit within that 30% cap. If you have questions on eligibility, don't plan to tackle them right now, because I hope that the eligibility is fairly black and white. But if you are any clarification questions, and there has been a couple, then contact us at this email address, industrial5gtt@culture.gov.uk. It's on the website as well. So if you Google, industrial 5G guidance gov.uk, you'll find the page. The email address is on there. And like I said, we will publish our answers on the website, as long as they're not commercially sensitive, in which case you'll still receive an answer. It will just be to you as an individual. So moving on to the next section of the guidance, where we're talking about collaboration and participation. So there are several types of collaboration that the projects will be expected to do once they're up and running. So one of them is working collaboratively with the Digital Catapult. And that's important because the approach to this project is designed to take advantage of a programmatic approach. So having a number of projects working on different manufacturing processes across the sector as a whole, and working together in order to benefit the sector as a whole and the economy as a whole. And having Digital Catapult as a support partner to these projects is a new model for us, and it's something that we hope is going to help with bringing that programmatic approach and programmatic benefits to life. So working with the Digital Catapult is an important part of these projects, and you're going to get a full explanation of what that involves later on from Ian. All of our projects across the program have to sign the project participation agreement. This is included in the supporting documentation with the guidance, so you can read it. All partners will have to sign that in order to be a partner with the project. It's fairly lightweight. It basically commits you to being open with sharing the results of the project and working together, essentially. We expect all of our projects to work closely with UK 5G. That's a good thing. It's a benefit, not a burden. Working with UK 5G brings a lot of benefits, right from the forming consortia stage through to disseminating the results of your project. In fact, the results of phase 1 projects will going to soon start become available through UK 5G, probably whilst this application window is open. So that'll be good resource for people to explore whilst putting together their proposals. And something I touched on earlier on, each project consortium must proactively seek to recruit additional organisations at around the 12-month point of the project. And this is aimed to particularly encourage the participation of SMEs. And that's something that we have done that's new to these projects, and that's based on our lessons learned from the previous projects, where we looked at what SMEs found difficult about participating in these projects. And we, like I said earlier on, we still have to stay within the state aid rules, but we've added this requirement for projects to run an open call at the 12-month stage to recruit additional organizations, because we think that that will be particularly appealing to SMEs to potentially avoid the more testbed building phase of the project and come in at the more trials focused phase, when they can move directly to trials and gain the benefits of actually testing their how 5G works with their existing products or services, or how they can develop new products and services using a testbed that's already been constructed. And that applies to both manufacturing and logistics projects. With manufacturing projects, there is a what we're calling a project development review. The open call forms part of that, but it's not all of that, and we'll come on to that later on in the presentation. So, like I said, going in specifically to the open call, this is designed to make it easier for SMEs, but it's also, the other main benefit is designed to give the projects an element of flexibility, because we know that a lot can change in the first year of a project. We know that from some of the earlier projects that the program has run. This is designed to give the projects flexibility to expand their consortium once they have learned lessons and have the experience of building their testbed. They'll know more about what kind of trials that their testbed could be used for and what potential impact of those trials could be, and so it gives them a chance to expand their consortium or realign the makeup of their consortium. And I already said the last point, this will form part of the project development review for manufacturing projects. There's a Q&A coming up. Can you hold it in? Yeah? Is that okay?
Yeah, it was just to make a section about
yeah, well, we're going to do, so Ian's going to come up and he's going to talk exactly what the working with Digital Catapult is like as part of the collaboration piece. So
it was just to understand what you put behind sharing knowledge. What is knowledge? IPR, it is data, what is it?
Well, knowledge can be in any form. We haven't specified what that means. But you know, projects are expected to share. And we know that projects, businesses involved in projects can have problems sharing IP or commercially advantageous information like that. But that's really referring to the knowledge and learning generated from these projects. That should be open to.
For academics, it's easy to share knowledge. It's what we do every day. But
yeah.
For industry, very often they want to have a return on investment from projects, and one of these one is IPR. So.
Yeah, no, we recognize that, but certainly all of the knowledge generated from conducting the project should be open to sharing and collaboration. And we have an explanation of open access, what we mean by that, in the documentation. So if anyone else is worried about that, then in first instance, I recommend you read that open access section, and then of course feel free to ask questions to us one-on-one. Anyway, so Ian's going to come in and he's going to tell you about what we say when we mean, what we mean when we say that the projects are going to be required to work with Digital Catapult.
Okay, thank you, Joe. I'd like to just reiterate Richard's earlier words. We're sharing a lot of information with you today. All of this will be available on the UK 5G website. And I believe we're also recording this event, so you can enjoy this multiple times round if you'd like to do so. So, just talking a little bit about the role of Digital Catapult, and also picking up on a question that we had earlier about our role in this project. So first of all, an ambition. So an ambition to put the UK as a global leader in industrial 5G. And you've heard this term industrial 5G this morning. It's the name that's at the very start of the competition. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that term means as well for you today. And the industrial 5G coordination program that Digital Catapult is going to help deliver is to ensure that the projects that we're working on, they share learnings and best practices to shape the future direction of 5G in the UK and to maximise its impact on a national scale. We really want to make sure that the UK is a leader in this area. And as Joe has already mentioned, Digital Catapult is here as a partner to support DCMS in this competition. And they've selected us because of our expertise and leadership in 5G and because of our mission as an organisation to advance the adoption of advanced digital technologies in industry. So, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to provide a framework to support the projects to work together. We're going to assist in the coordination of cross-project technical and coordination activities. A little bit more about those in the next couple of slides. We're going to work with DCMS to define a set of programme outcomes for the evaluation of the projects and promote this initiative along with UK 5G to make sure that we disseminate learnings and that as many people as possible know what we're doing and what industrial 5G is and how we're progressing. So, what is industrial 5G? So this term that we wish to continue to use is a term that involves these aspects. Utilisation of particular characteristics of 5G around low latency, high reliability communications, the introduction of mass machine-to-machine communications for real-time and mission-critical applications. Again, another aspect of 5G capabilities, the utilisation of orchestration of capabilities to allocate, connect and manage resources and essentially to function as the network of networks, which is one of the fundamentals of 5G. We want to develop together the use cases and test beds which will trial and showcase 5G capabilities within the UK and internationally. And obviously in the sectors of manufacturing and logistics, the two sectors that we're involving here in this competition. Industrial 5G is also about developing models for spectrum licensing. So Ofcom are adopting a more flexible approach to spectrum licensing. They need help in doing that, and by the application of the 5G in the test beds and trials that we're foreseeing, it will help inform Ofcom with their licensing policy. And indeed, another thing that we need to do is to select the most appropriate specifications and profiles for the industrial adoption of 5G. So in terms of coordination, so consortia, as Joe has already mentioned, will work with Digital Catapult and as the DCMS support partner. I want to emphasize, as was already asked and answered, but I emphasize again, Digital Catapult is not bidding in this competition. We have a completely neutral role. We're independent to all of the parties who wish to participate within it. And any organisation that is working with Digital Catapult, those related interactions with us are at no cost to you. Okay, we're already funded by DCMS to see this project through to the end, and all of your interactions with us are there's no cost to that. So the involvement in the joint programme, there will be activities such as working groups that we will convene. DCMS has we've mapped out a program with DCMS of a series of activities that are going to happen over the coming period. There will be workshops, there will be various activities that we will organise for you to be involved in, and these are all around the theme of collaboration, with the full intent that they're to the benefit of all parties, and we end up with a whole which is greater than the sum of the individual parts at the end of this. And these activities, they're allocated, I think, 2 to 4% of the DCMS grant. This is in the documentation that, again, is on the government website. In terms of technical coordination, just a feel for what's involved here. So we want to work together towards a common informed view of 5G and its use in industry. Cross-project activities to support those common themes, workshops and roundtables, identify gaps. There may be gaps in specifications, there may be gaps in understanding, there may be gaps in implementation, and there may be obstacles along the way. So we're here to help overcome those and help us all move forward rapidly and effectively in the projects. And again, the theme about sharing knowledge and experience. We also intend to run, if requested and required, training and educational events, look at high level technical requirements, explore the technologies that can be used, including the advantages and disadvantages of different technology options. On the innovation side, we have, over the years that Digital Catapult has been in existence, we've had the opportunity to develop a catalogue and a suite of different ways of working with startups to spur on greater innovation, to enable those startups to engage with potential customers, to see industrial use cases come to fruition. I've only just recently been involved with a project that brought very small enterprises into touch with one of our defence service companies. So we can create that supportive environment, ensure collaboration is happening within the projects and across them. We can facilitate connections. It may be that you want to bring in other innovators into your projects. We can help improve the reach and dissemination of the learnings through our own channels and, of course, with the assistance of UK 5G. We can, as I mentioned earlier on, establish that set of shared program-wide success measures to inform project evaluation and resolve the challenges that you may have both on the technical and in the innovation space to make sure that we're moving forward and not getting stuck as we progress with these projects. Because we understand that there is a lot expected within the project timeline. And indeed, increase access to innovation experience through shared resources. If there's any questions that you may have of an innovation or technical nature around industrial 5G collaboration, we've set up a specific email address for that, industrial5g@digitalcatapult.org.uk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ian. I hope that was helpful, but we're going to continue on. We're going to power through this, and then we're going to do the Q&A at the end. So moving on, if you're following on the guidance document itself, we're into the application process itself. So some timelines. So it's open right now. So the documentation went up on last Thursday, which is the 18th of July. That means the competition is open. All of the documentation that we plan to publish is available already. But we will update with the answers to questions that are submitted at the same on the same page that you can find the guidance right now. So clarification questions that you submit via that email address that I mentioned, for a guaranteed response, you should submit them by the 30th of August, and we guarantee that anything submitted by that date will be answered and published on the website. The applications must be in by midday on the 10th of October. That's exactly 12 weeks from when the competition opens. So the application window is 12 weeks long. The assessment process is, like I said, is done by DCMS ourselves. We will shortlist applicants. We'll do an initial assessment, and we'll make a short list of applicants who will then be notified in October. And we will interview face-to-face those shortlisted applicants. So location to be determined, but you should expect that those interviews will take place in central London. So applicants will be expected to be available for those in November. We'll then make a selection for which projects to fund from those shortlisted applicants. In November, the winning consortia will have to sign the grant funding agreement, an example of which is provided along with the competition documentation. So you can see right now the grant funding agreement that you'll be expected to sign should you be successful. That should happen by December, and we then realize that Christmas usually happens around that time of year, so you can expect the actual grant-funded project activities to commence in January of next year. That email address that's at the bottom of the screen, that's the same one I mentioned earlier on for submitting your clarification questions to. That's the same place that you submit your finished proposals. So make sure you send it to the right place. And the noon deadline on the 10th of October is a strict deadline, so make sure you meet it. And I've encouraged you to consume all of this guidance sooner rather than later, so you can know whether you want to ask any clarification questions and be well placed to put together a proposal. I mentioned this earlier on as well. You will be asked to indicate which sector your project is going to take place in, manufacturing or logistics, and this is so we can determine whether your application is in scope of the competition for the relevant sector, because there are different amounts of funding available. So that's why we ask you to specify. We use a portfolio approach, and this is something that we've done in all of our previous projects as well. And what that means is that we want to ensure a spread of projects across the sectors. So in this case, in these cases, that means a spread of different manufacturing processes and in the manufacturing sector, and a spread of overarching challenges in the logistics sector. So we score all projects on their merit, but we then do reserve the right to apply this portfolio approach to ensure that we have that spread across manufacturing processes and overarching logistics challenges. Referring to manufacturing projects, particularly, manufacturing projects will be assessed based on proposals based on delivery of a single project for the duration of the project, but with a project development review around 1 year into the project. So I mentioned the project development review earlier on. Your proposal should still cover the full time frame of the project, so the full 2 to 2.5 years, the period up until the end of the grant funding period on the 31st of March 2022. In the documentation, it explains how you will be required to provide greater detail for the first 12 months, and it can be more high level for the period after that, but your proposal should cover the full period in its entirety. But hopefully having that project development review will make it easier to, because you won't have to provide as much detail for the later stages of the project. So at the project development review, and this is referring to the manufacturing competition process specifically, so the review doesn't apply to logistics projects. That's another reason why it's important to indicate which of the competitions your proposal is aimed at. Each manufacturing project will submit an updated proposal for the remaining funding period, so the period to the 31st of March 2022. And this should happen between months 10 and 14 of the project. So assuming that the projects start in January of next year, you submit this any time between October of 2020 and February of 2021. And it'll be this is designed to be an opportunity to manufacturing projects. Because first of all, like I mentioned, it means that you don't have to be as specific in your plan about the final 12 to 18 months of the project. That's hopefully beneficial during the application phase, and it provides an opportunity to realign the approach based on the lessons learned in the first 12 months, and to realign your consortium again with the open call, which we hope will encourage SMEs. And you can use this to refine your approach. A lot of things can change in the first 12 months of a project. We know that from experience. The market can change in terms of what the challenges are, what makes the strongest potential benefits can change over 12 months. The availability of networking equipment can change over 12 months. So what makes for the best trials to run in the testbed can change over that first 12 months, and this can all be brought out in the updated proposals that are submitted by manufacturing projects as part of the development review. I keep hammering home SMEs. This is designed for a few reasons, but one of the main ones is to be appealing to SMEs. So the proposals should have a good plan for how they are targeting SMEs specifically in their open call in order for their proposal to be to score highly. But it's also to help ensure that projects are delivering high quality outcomes. So it is also a quality check on the projects. But it's an opportunity to ensure that quality, both for us at DCMS and for the projects themselves. And they will have flexibility to change course if they feel that the potential quality of their outcomes has been impacted by changes to the market in the first 12 months of the project. And we'll continue at the project development review to ensure that we have a balanced portfolio approach. So everything I just said about applying a portfolio approach to the application stage, we will also apply at the product development review for manufacturing projects. So step by step, how it will work in manufacturing projects. So like I said, the project lead submits the application that covers the full grant funding period, right? So the period before the project development review and after the project development review leading up to the 31st of March 2022. We review for eligibility, and then those eligible projects are passed to DCMS assessors. We will shortlist applicants after the initial assessment, and we will interview one-on-one the shortlisted applicants. Successful applicants will then be issued with a grant funding agreement, and this is the grant funding agreement that is available as part of the supporting documentation to the guidance on the website. There's a different one for manufacturing and logistics, so there's two supplied on the website, so make sure you read the right one for the sector that your project is taking place in. We will provide feedback for all eligible and in-scope applications, so including the ones that are not shortlisted. They'll still provide feedback. Specifically for manufacturing projects, so if the project is chosen, you'll sign the grant agreement, begin begin the activities described in your proposal, and then between months 10 and 14, the lead organisation, just like during the initial application phase, will submit a refined, updated plan, including new milestones and new spend profile for the remainder of the project. So exactly when you plan to do this, between months 10 and 14, you should be made clear in your initial proposal. So you have some flexibility within that period, but you should make it clear when you intend to do this and why that is, and then of course what you intend to do to recruit more organisations. DCMS will then assess those updated plans, and the grant funding agreement that was signed after the successful application will be updated to reflect those changes. So there'll be new milestones, and we can also flex milestones, adjust at that point, those are the milestones that the project will have to deliver against in order to continue receiving grant funding. So in logistics, we'll apply a portfolio approach. I've already described that. So it's exactly the same as for manufacturing, but the portfolio that we're trying to ensure are those overarching logistics, those overarching challenges to the logistics industry rather than the manufacturing processes. The logistics competition will take applications that cover the full funding period, as I just described for manufacturing, but there is no project development review for logistics projects. This is because logistics projects are already larger scale, potentially have larger consortiums from consortia from the outset, and we feel that the scale of the challenges that logistics projects are expected to tackle mean that it's better to not to have the formal product development review, but the open call at the 12-month stage to recruit more consortium members still applies to logistics projects, just as it does in manufacturing. So that will still happen around the 12-month point. So there'll still be an opportunity to recruit more organizations and particularly target that open call at SMEs. The third point now is this project expected to submit fully costed bids except for funding allocated to partners brought on after the open call. So hopefully that will be part of the project finance forms that each proposal must submit, and there'll be no review point for logistics projects. So everything you've heard about project development review does not apply to logistics projects. So the steps are very, very similar. You submit the applications just like in a manufacturing process. We'll review, we'll do the same process of shortlisting, interviewing, signing the grant funding agreement, and the timelines are exactly the same. So grant funding activities should commence in January of 2020, just like in manufacturing. So the timelines for both sectors are the same, and this same shortlisting process applies to both sectors. So how to apply. So I refer to consortia again and again. Before you submit, the lead partner submits their application, they must have the consortium already in place. So the application should include details of who the partners are to the consortium and what kind of partner they are to the consortium. And each partner will complete their own finance form, and that all needs to happen before the proposal is the application is submitted. There is support available for forming consortia, particularly from UK 5G. So they have a matching service. Will already mentioned it. If you go to their website, if you're a business who is looking for partners, they can provide help in finding partners. and they can also provide advice as well as the matching service itself. Digital Catapult can also provide advice on technical coordination during the application phase, if that is helpful to projects as well. So there must be a lead applicant. I've mentioned this already. So the lead applicant is the one who will submit the application and the one that we will deal with during the application phase. So when it comes to providing feedback, arranging interviews, signing the grant agreement, it's the lead applicant that we will deal with. So whoever is designated the lead applicant should expect a kind of extra administrative burden during the application process to go through the process, hopefully successful, and to get the funding in place. So they should be prepared to work with us during that process. Lead applicants can, of course, it's perfectly fine for the other partners to help them write the application. Just because they're the ones that finally submit it doesn't mean that it has to be all their own words. It's totally fine for partners across the consortium to collaborate, to work together to prepare the proposal. It's just to make working life easier for us. We work with one lead applicant during the application process. I've already mentioned the email address. Re-emphasize the deadline midday on the 10th of October to that email address. That's the same for both sectors, manufacturing and logistics. The details of this are in the guidance, but bear in mind there will be more than one document that you have to submit, right? So the application form, the project finance form, so there'll be one of those for each of the consortium members, right? So that could be dozens, depending on how big your consortium is. The finance summary form is only for manufacturing projects, okay? So that does not apply to logistics projects. So that's an additional form that manufacturing projects will have to supply that logistics ones will not. In the application form, it explains how you may include appendices. And those appendices must be submitted as PDFs, and they're designed to provide space for you to use tables and graphs and diagrams, and the application form itself is for written text. So the two of them go hand in hand, and this is explained in the application form where a question, where you provide the answer to the question and when appendices can also be provided. It's all in the application form itself rather than the competition guidance document. Okay, so for an explanation of how to actually fill out the application form, you need to look in the application form itself. Okay, so we're going to go through the application form itself. So the summary of the proposed project. So this is for you writing a proposal to provide a short description of the project. The summary is not scored. It's an opportunity to introduce your proposal to the assessors. Okay, so it's still important, even though it's not part of the scoring process. The assessors are human beings. In order for them to understand your proposal in its entirety, bear in mind they could be assessing a lot of these, you need to introduce it to them and explain it to them in a way that they can understand. And this is the first opportunity to make that introduction. This will be the first time they hear about your proposal and read about it. So you'll want to write this in a way that is easy and concise for the assessors to understand in that way. The public description of the project. Okay, so this is another part of the application form that you have to provide. Again, it's not scored. The difference between this and the summary is that this will be published as part of our transparency obligations around managing public money. We will publish information related to grant funding projects to comply with the government practice on openness and transparency. So you should, as you write this, you should write this in a way that you are comfortable with it being shared publicly. And this will apply to potentially all of the projects, even if your proposal is not taken forward for assessment and not ultimately successful. These may still be published, so you should consider this section carefully. So the first question you have to answer is around scope. So you'll be asked to describe how you believe your project is within the scope that I went through earlier on and that is described in detail in the documentation. So eligibility is black and white questions. The scope is somewhat more malleable, and this is your opportunity to explain what your proposal is and why you believe it is in scope of this competition and should be considered for the grant funding. So you have to align with specific competition scopes. There are two scopes, okay, manufacturing and logistics, that we went through earlier on. There are common scope elements that all proposals will have to hit, and then they'll also have to hit either the manufacturing scope or the logistics scope. So this does ultimately boil down to a question of eligibility in terms of meeting that scope. So you're either in scope or out of scope. Okay, so you need to make a compelling case based on the information about the scope that we've provided in the documentation. So if there's anything you're unclear of, you should ask clarification questions to us either today, or anything you think of as you read the guidance in more detail, ask via the website to make sure that you're within scope, because only applications that are within scope will proceed to the assessment stage. Okay, so I'm going to put up each of the questions. These are exactly as they are in the application form, so I'm not going to go through them in detail. All of the thinking behind what we expect from each question we have provided in the bullet points underneath each question. So anything that's unclear or you feel is missing from that, please do say for your questions later on. But I'll describe briefly what the different sections are. So section 1, the business case or the vision. This is where you make clear what your proposal is, basically. So what are you proposing to do with the grant funding money should you be successful? So first bullet, describe the main motivation for the project. So this is where you describe what you're doing. And I'll point out that you see the 12.5% in brackets. That's because that is the weighting for the individual questions, right? So that's attached. There's a number like that attached to each individual question. There's 10 questions. They're not all weighted equally, okay? So some are weighted more important than others. And the length of the answers, so the word limits that are in the application form, are different for the different questions. So, okay, so they're relative to their weighting, right? So the higher the weighting, the longer the potential answer is, and the more space that is given for that. So you should pay attention to that in the application form. Okay, so section 1, business case. Basically, what is your project going to do? Okay, so what is the main motivation? What are the key outputs from your project? Yeah, so what are you going to do? What is going to be the outcomes from doing that? How will doing that contribute to society and the local economy? So what are you going to do? What are the consequences? What are the outputs of doing that? And how is that going to contribute to the program aims? Okay, both for the industrial 5G test beds and trials and for the 5G program as a whole. This is the opportunity to explain how you're going to contribute to that. The one thing I will point out is that it listed there underneath and in the question itself, contribute to society and the local economy. So I've spoken a lot about the productivity and efficiency and other financial benefits of using 5G in industry, but as a department, DCMS is also aware of the social impact of our policies. So describing social benefits can be just as valid as describing financial benefits. And one of the obvious examples there is the environment. So potentially efficiency gains from using 5G in manufacturing logistics could lead to a reduction in emissions. That's not a direct financial benefit, but it's a social one, and you can include that and be scored just as highly. I've gone there too far. So the final one, no, not the final one, but continuing the business case section, we're interested in the ecosystem. You can see I've mentioned that a few times already today. The programmatic approach of these projects is supposed to benefit the ecosystem as a whole and the economy as a whole. So this is your opportunity to explain how you're going to fit into that programmatic approach and deliver that. How is your project going to deliver a commercially sustainable output? This is part of this stage of the investment is to start focusing on projects that can become commercially sustainable. So if you've been following the program so far or been involved in earlier parts of the program, this is going to be slightly different. So that's a key aspect of what makes this different to previous projects. So that's something that we really want to bring out. So moving on to section 2. So section 1 is what is your proposal and what is it going to do and why is it good? And section 2 it's about project delivery, and this is about ensuring that the businesses involved have good business practices that they're going to apply to these projects, and they're going to manage the project effectively, and they're going to manage public money effectively as well. So you'll be expected to provide a detailed project plan, including milestones and deliverables, bearing in mind that for manufacturing projects, there is an opportunity to realign the milestones at the project development review. So you should bear that in mind as you're answering this question. Sorry for that. Project governance, again, this is about ensuring that you're going to manage the project effectively. So you've got a good idea. This is where you demonstrate that you're going to manage the project and the resources effectively. That's what section 2 is about. Risk management is part of section 2 as well. So you must demonstrate effective risk management. These are standard good business practices, so it's nothing out of the ordinary for private sector businesses and other organizations, but you need to bring that out in these answers and in your proposal to provide reassurance that the project is going to be run effectively and public money is going to be managed effectively. And speaking of public money, section 3 is about funding and added value. So this is where the finance forms come in, and this is where you show that you have the processes in place to manage the money responsibly and to deliver value for money for the projects. Okay, so it's good business practice, good financial management. The businesses have to reassure the assessors that these are sound businesses that are going to use public money responsibly. And the final one, how does financial support from DCMS and financial contributors add value? So it's an important question. Again, how is the project going to move forward in terms of how is it going to move the market forward? How are the different contributors to the project, so the different consortium members, what value do they add, right? So this is where you both in monetary terms, so how much are they going to receive in grant funding, and therefore how much are they going to contribute, and also in the wider added value that consortium members can bring. There's more information available. I've run through this. I've been giving you a lot of information. I realize that. Full details of this, of course, are on the website about this competition. You can read more about the program on the website as well. and the contact email address is there. We're industrial5gtt@culture.gov.uk. That's us at DCMS. There's also UK 5G and Digital Catapult. So any questions regarding the competition should come to us. Anything about forming consortium, you might contact UK 5G first, and anything about the collaboration aspects or technical aspects, then Digital Catapult are your man, or men out of them. Okay, so I realize that was a lot of information. Hopefully you've been holding your burning questions until now, and we can move on to them now. Richard has got the microphone.
Absolutely, thanks. Oh, one, two, testing. Is this one on again? 1, 2, 1, 2. Oh, there we go. Right.
Is it this one? Oh yeah, this one is on. So, go to you first.
So, just rapidly, the first section, the question 3, when you say local, the business case, what is the business case for local? Can you define local? Is it the area of the test bed? Is it the region? Is it the UK?
What's the difference between area and region in this context? So it's not the UK. It's the direct areas around where the testbed may be in multiple locations, of course, particularly for logistics projects. So it's kind of the immediate area around it. We haven't imposed any boundary on what we consider local. I think a convincing case can be made for various distances from where the testbed is. But it is talking about the area around the testbed. It's not talking about the UK as a country.
It's still the impact of the geography where the testbed, if one site or more sites is deployed.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello. In the recruitment of SMEs later on in the project, I can see 2 scenarios. One is where an SME is taking on a major piece of work, so they're basically becoming a partner to the project.
Yeah.
Another is where we want to recruit a lot of SMEs, probably via a local council, and give them small amounts of money to become involved.
Mm-hmm.
How should we budget for that in our applications?
Hi, so I'm Jacob, the Commercial Leadership Programme. Small room, but we'll use the mic. So we haven't prescribed how much funding you should set aside. So obviously there are the funding envelopes for the projects. As with all these projects, a long-term project, you're gonna be making some estimates, but we haven't prescribed that 25% of your funding should be set aside, or that 5% should be set aside. So it's very much what fits best with your project. If your project is looking like a very open-ended project, and you think there's going to be a large engagement, then budget for it. If you think there are going to be some specific little bits which you think people would like to engage in, then budget accordingly. But we're not prescribing.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a second question.
Okay.
With the 2 to 4% budget for liaison with the Catapult, we put that into our own costs, because I've worked on another project with another Catapult, and the senior staff overhead expected by that Catapult and the short-term timetables at which point they're supposed to drop everything to attend a workshop has proven to be sometimes difficult to manage. How should we budget for that?
James got something to say as well, but the 2 to 40% is for collaboration in general, some of which is through the Catapult, but not exclusively. Do you want to continue?
Yeah, I'll just say to clarify, so the 4% costs there are your consortium costs. So as Ian said, Digital Catapult having their own funding, so we're not expecting you to put aside money for Digital Catapult to support you. It is 2 to 4% of your consortium's budget should be allocated to these kind of activities, which DC will then support.
So I've got a few questions online.
Sure.
So can I take a couple of those?
Yes.
So one question is it possible to have a project which covers both manufacturing and logistics? Possibly a simple answer?
A short answer, yes, it is possible. You can make a case for that. You still need to indicate on the application form which scope your project is within, because there are different requirements and there are different amounts of funding available. Okay, so that's why you still have to make clear which scope you are targeting. But once you've targeted a scope and within that scope, you can design your proposal to feature interaction with the other sector, and you can explain the benefits of why that's good, and I can imagine there are many, and so it is possible, yeah.
One other question whilst we're online. Can the subcontracting amount, I think you've got a limit of 30% can be subcontracted. Can any of that budget go to overseas companies? Overseas subcontractors, non-UK?
Do you want to take that one?
So I think it's the grant funding that is specifically UK only. So I think people have, if you buy stuff from abroad, that is allowed.
Would that be fundable as a project cost? That's the question.
Yes, it's the grant funding that can't flow to non-UK companies.
Okay.
Sorry, was there a follow-up question?
How would that be managed? Because surely if an overseas subcontractor is used...
Can we just give you the mic so the online people get the question as well, please?
I'm just asking for clarification on that. How would that work out? Because, if a subcontractor is used and is an overseas one, would that mean that the industrial partner would only be able to charge 50% of their cost to the project, or?
Yes, so where a partner is choosing to subcontract some of their activity, they will be eligible to claim for the costs in line with their state aid requirements.
Yeah. So if you're eligible to claim for 50% of your costs, and one of your costs is subcontracting, then you can claim 50% of that cost, right?
Even if they're overseas?
Even if they're overseas.
Yeah, sorry. Typically, if you're going to subcontract overseas, you have to prove very much that there is not a UK resource that could perform that role. You can't just do it on cost.
Yeah. So you have to justify subcontracting in the first instance as well for why you need to subcontract and you can't do it, or one of the project partners can't do it. But assuming that's satisfied, then you have to satisfy another expectation. But is it possible to contract with companies overseas? Yes. The gentleman here.
Thank you. I don't understand the concept of the open call, because presumably you are seeking proposals which are complete solutions to problems. And if they turn out to be complete solutions, there is no need for further participants in that project. So what is it that you're seeking, and how is the scope of that open call defined at the time it arises?
Your point on complete solutions. So projects will have built a test bed of some sort, and there may be other companies out there that could benefit from using that test bed to conduct trials.
If you're a factory, if you're a manufacturing trial, then your test bed is your factory.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how other parties could independently use that test bed, that factory, for different things from what the factory is doing in the first place, because it is a commercial business on which you're deploying your project.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I've seen it done.
The test bed may well be a factory of sorts, but the test bed itself is not the whole factory, right? It's a networking element within the factory, and the companies that respond to the open call might be companies that could. So companies will have helped you construct the test bed, and they are that is a trial for them, right? They're testing out what it's like to construct a 5G test bed, to run a 5G network. And so some of the companies that could respond to the open call could be involved in that. They could be small telecoms suppliers, companies that could learn from your test bed what it's like to supply you as a manufacturer with networking facilities.
The scale of your project is a project of £6 to £8 million is the scale of something which is pretty much a factory, not a prototype line.
Well, for manufacturing projects, it's 3 to 4 million pounds. But the total cost, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Is 6 to 8 or greater.
Mm-hmm.
That is the scale of a deployment in a real factory, not in a prototyping line.
Yeah.
And if it's a real factory, I'm not quite sure what the opportunities are for third parties to do other things.
Can I suggest something?
Richard, do you want to give the microphone to the gent there?
Sorry.
Thanks. Perhaps to give an example, the company I'm representing today, Crawford, have a data marketplace which could be used in a logistics setting, but they intentionally do not offer the analytics that would sit on top of that. So they would be ideally placed to have an open call for analytics providers, which could include academics, could include SMEs, startups and so on, to actually implement different types of services in the logistics industry. So that would be an example in the logistics side. I don't know whether someone...
What I'm saying is that there are examples where it would work, but there are equally examples which are valid in themselves very good projects in which it wouldn't work, particularly in the manufacturing side. You're talking about logistics, which I think the situation is different.
Yeah, so there may be examples, as you suggest, where the open call you think for your test bed is going to be limited, and the projects can set out how much money they are setting aside for the open call. Okay, so according to their own needs.
It's discretionary, or the scale of it is discretionary.
The scale of it is discretionary, yes, but it should be done in some form or another. Hope that helps.
Okay, so we've got a point over here, I think, to that question as well. Hello, Jonathan Eaton from Spectrus. We have Millbrook as one of the 5G test beds, and we've got a 700-acre site. We've got a number of buildings and facilities there. Yeah. So prototype workshops and prototypes could be actually housed within that test bed. So it doesn't necessarily mean that...
I agree, it doesn't necessarily, but if there are a real factory, it would be very difficult.
Okay. So...
Hi, Peter Catapult from Viatech Associates. Going back to Ian in terms of the role that the Catapult is going to play, I seem to get a mixed message there as the Catapult being both an observer and there to answer difficult questions that might arise, given their expertise and background in manufacturing. But some of the other nuances in the wording that was used there would imply that the Catapult is going to help steer the project. Now, if you've actually got project leads there who actually are the ultimate, in other words, they've come forward to be the project lead, I'm not sure how this role is going to be managed over the period of the project, and specifically when it comes to things such as expertise in and around spectrum, which I know the Catapult does not have, and there are other organisations who can do that a lot better.
Well, the Catapult will be there to support the projects and ensure the programmatic approach that we're aiming for, right? So helping them work together. But Ian can
you just on that, can you define what you mean by support? Is that active engagement, in other words, helping steer, or is that just a passive role to actually answer questions?
Well,
it's very important to the lead.
It's support as the projects require it, right? So the support is available. Not all projects will need all forms of support. So we've been talking about the open call for SMEs. So the Catapult can help with that. Okay, they can help organize that, help with putting how to get in touch with very small innovative companies is something the Catapult can do, for example. If you don't need that support, then that's fine too, but it's there if you need it. Do you want to say anything on that, Ian?
Only to say I agree with the answer that Joe's given. We don't have the capacity to steer your projects in a particular direction or not. we're just here to support and work in partnership with DCMS.
You did talk about steering the projects to work together collaboratively and to keep it as a well-defined portfolio.
Yeah.
Including client apps, steering one project away from something that another is doing.
Well, that is the portfolio approach that DCMS will apply rather than the Catapult. But that's something we apply at the application stage, yeah.
So if the delegates could just wait to get a mic before they speak, otherwise the online audience won't get the question as well. So I think we're going over there.
Hi, Peter Stoker from Millbrook. There's some other grant opportunities, either running or floating or whatever, such as local enterprise partnerships, the Innovate Strength in Places grants, and even a potential one from CCAV on logistics for autonomy, but I think that's subject to comprehensive spending review. Do you see these as sort of complementary or a complication?
Complementary is how we see them. So we're aware of I mean, there are other opportunities within the program itself, right? So the Urban Connected Communities project in the West Midlands is very likely to have a manufacturing testbed as part of their wider integrated testbed in that region. And that's funded from within our program, so we're obviously aware of this. We've thought about it, and we think that we are taking a balanced approach, and that that there is room for both. There are other. There's also RCC, Rural Connect Communities, within the program that it could potentially touch on some similar areas, and there's the ones that you described as well. We think that they all make sense. I don't know in detail all of them, but we do coordinate with Bays and Innovate as well. So we have thought about the approach, and I hope that you'll find them complementary.
Okay, so we've got a question over here, but before I give the gentleman the mic, I've got another one from online. There was a question whether or not a testbed could be an overseas city.
A testbed could be located overseas.
Could it be an overseas city that is the testbed?
In an overseas city?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No.
Good answer.
It needs to be in the UK.
Pass over.
Sorry, two questions about this proposal updating. When the partners go through that, are they eligible costs?
Are they eligible costs?
Yeah.
Oh,
you're going to want a re-proposal and all the activities to find these extra partners. Is that an eligible cost or is it not? Budgeting.
You know, I don't know. Okay.
Yes, if it's. You're sorry. Yes. Yes. If it's something we've asked you to do as part of the project.
Okay, thank you. And where we are expanding a consortium with new partners, and essentially, I presume, augmenting a consortium agreement and IP agreement, and those things are generally part of the grant agreement and provided to you, are we essentially telling you that's what we want to do, or are we asking for an environment which you judge?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
When we augment the partnership with new companies after 12 months, that will require some augmentation or change, potentially to a consortium agreement, that kind of thing. Are we then proposing that that's what are we saying that's the consortium we want to have in the future, and that is accepted by you, or is it essentially you are then assessing it and its environment which you have to give permission for?
So, do you want to add something, Joe?
Well, you go first and I'll add something if I need to.
So if you had a chance to read the guidance, it sets that out in a bit more detail. So we're asking for you to show us what's your proposed approach to selecting partners, and then at the end, those are the partners that are selected. DCMS obviously has requirements around national security considerations for partners selected, but it's not that we're going to be doing then another round of assessment on top of that to run another competition or anything, no. And in terms of the collaboration agreement, we have minimum requirements on the collaboration agreement. If it's still compliant with those, I don't see any issue.
Yes, hi. Would an advanced warehousing application be in scope? This is particularly
an advanced
food,
warehousing application.
Yeah, food warehousing and distribution.
It sounds like it would be in the scope of logistics.
It's not really manufacturing. I mean, it's it's moving things around. So food comes in, it gets allocated.
So it sounds like it would be in scope of logistics competition.
Okay. Although the type of application to it would probably be more like you would in a manufacturing environment. So it's robotics, it's control of the robotics with 5G and so on. So
that can apply to
so it could go to either one, or would it be more likely logistics? I mean, it makes a difference because the money's different, right?
It would depend on the consortium that you're a part of. If the other consortium members, I mean, it's hard to say without knowing what it is, but if the other consortium members were using that robotics in a manufacturing environment, then the fact that you're not a manufacturing company doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with that. So the consortium as a whole could be manufacturing focused.
Could apply it to manufacturing.
But it sounds like you could support either a consortium interested in either scope.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Question over here.
Hi, it's Siamak Tavakoli from Crypto Labs. Question is a bit probably odd. The 5G network aspect of the application, the fund application, could that fit in the open call part of the application as an upgrade or as something? So we have, could we have a range of, so for in some applications in terms of latency, 4G LTE could also satisfy. Beyond 5G is also being talked about.
Could the first 12 months use 4G and then adding the 5G happen? Yeah. So the projects are expected to make use of what's available in the market. So it's hard to say. I mean, you could make a case for that, but we are encouraging projects to make good use of what is available. So if there is 5G equipment available for your use cases in the first 12 months and you're not utilizing it, that could be a negative on your score. But
for sure. So I'm thinking of the risk management part of it. In case it's not available, then can be fitted.
So if you can make a case for like a specific use case that we want to test. The 5G equipment is not available now, but here's a bunch of supporting evidence that says it will be available at this point in the project, and we intend to make this part of our, review or open call. You could make a case for that.
Okay. I've got one more online. I think you probably answered it, but I'll ask it anyway, which is, are the testbed areas predefined?
Is in their geographical locations?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
No. So it's up to the proposal. It's up to the proposal to explain where the testbed are located. Why.
Thought that was the case, but just thought I'd ask. Yeah. Cheers.
Absolutely.
Thank you. To follow up that the question from the previous person, does your definition of 5G include LTE Release 15? Because that has a big impact on what technologies are available.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get back to you on that from one of our technical team.
GPP defines it as including it. So.
Okay.
From DC's point of view, the answer is yes.
Sorry?
From Digital Catapult's point of view, from a technical point of view, yes, is the answer to your question.
One more over here.
Hi, it's Stephen from Wellway. Are you working directly with the operators to also get their involvement in the project, or you expect them to be part of consortiums?
We haven't worked with them so far on involving them in this. I mean, the program is in regular contact with them, so certainly know about it. But they haven't been involved in our preparations so far. Do we see them being part of the project? Yes. I mean, I can very much imagine how the projects are going to either want or require them to be part of their consortium, but we're not requiring projects to to do that. It's up to the proposals to make the decision themselves.
Okay, thanks.
Hi there, Mike Kennett from iWireless Solutions. I attended the Sheffield event a couple of weeks ago, and one of the first bullet points was that the projects must be industry-led, which I assume meant the lead partner must be a manufacturer or similar. Is that the case now, or can the lead partner be? Are there any constraints on who the lead partner can be?
The lead partner needs to be a private sector business. That's what industry-led means. Yeah.
Any more for any more?
Question to follow up that. You say the lead partner needs to be a private sector business, but does it need to be one of the larger participants in terms of percentage of grant funding, or can it be a relatively small participant in terms of the overall financial contribution or financial package?
Jacob?
Yeah, so there's no requirement on the lead partner to be a certain percentage of the funding. It's the role of lead partner. As in the role described in the competition guidance. So leading the application, managing the project.
Yeah.
Righty-ho.
Could be, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the gentleman was just saying it could be an SME. And
could it therefore be a company that is whose role is to do that, basically?
So their specific role in the project is to be the lead partner.
The financial distribution.
I would say that each partner and their role needs to be justified as to why that brings value. So if that's their specific value add, then make the case for it. If not, then each partner should have their appropriate role.
So one final question, I think, from online, probably an easy one again. Is additive manufacturing eligible in this?
Yes, yeah. All kinds of manufacturing. So I mean, the type of manufacturing that people tend to spring to mind when we talk about 5G manufacturing is high-tech, high-value stuff. But we hope that the approach that we've outlined in the guidance makes it open to all kinds of manufacturing. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you kindly. What a tour de force. Wow, that was a long morning. Joe, Jacob, Will, Ian, thank you very much for going through an exhausting and exhaustive process. We're now going to break for a bite to lunch, so goodbye to our online friends. We hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you have any follow-up questions, then do avail yourselves of the various contact points that have been suggested. After lunch, for those here, we will be having some short pitches. Some people will be setting out what they got and what they're after to help with hopefully some consortium forming. But please, a big hand for the DCMS and DC.
So lunch is out there.